My name is Nadia, and I'm 29 years old, and I'll never forget the day my coworkers decided I wasn't worth sitting with. When I first joined Axion Marketing, I was filled with that nervous excitement you get when life feels like it's finally turning a corner. I'd left a toxic job before, thinking this company would be different, the kind of place where hard work meant something. The office was sleek, filled with bright white desks and the faint smell of coffee. Everyone looked polished and confident. I wanted to belong here. My new team was made up of 4 women: Brianna, the team lead, and her little circle of loyal followers, Kayla, Reese, and Donna. They were laughing when I first walked in, sipping iced coffees like they were at brunch instead of work. Brianna greeted me with that kind of smile that looks warm but feels cold once you're close enough to feel it. "Oh, hey, you must be the new analyst. We were just talking about where to put you." I expected her to show me a desk near the group, maybe next to the window or with the others. Instead, she gestured toward a lonely desk by the door. "You can sit there," she said. "It's kind of the perfect spot. You can see everyone coming in and out." The others giggled like it was some inside joke. I smiled politely, pretending not to notice. I took my seat, unpacked my things, and told myself it didn't matter. But as the day went on, I realized that desk wasn't just near the door, it was practically outside the team circle. They all faced each other, chatting about weekend plans and office gossip, while I stared at the back of their heads. When I tried joining in, my comments went ignored. If I laughed at something, they stopped talking. It was subtle, no outright cruelty, but I could feel it. I wasn't part of them. I was the observer, the one by the door. By the second week, the pattern became obvious. Brianna would call across the room, "Nadia, can you grab the printouts?" Or, "Nadia, could you grab me a coffee since you're near the door?" The others laughed every time she said it. I played along, keeping my voice steady. "Sure," I'd say. Inside, I felt myself shrinking a little more each day. The door became a symbol of distance. Every time it opened, I caught glimpses of people walking freely down the hallway, people who didn't feel trapped between faked laughter and shallow smiles. I envied them. During lunch, the team went out together and never once asked if I wanted to come. So I ate at my desk, scrolling through meaningless emails, pretending not to hear their laughter echoing from the hallway. Sometimes, when I'd stay late finishing reports that everyone else had abandoned, I'd look around that quiet office and wonder how I'd ended up here again, surrounded by people but completely invisible. Still, I tried to hold on to professionalism. I told myself they'd come around once they saw my work ethic. I was careful, precise, and always met deadlines. But no matter what I did, they seemed to grow colder, as if my competence was some kind of threat. Then one Friday afternoon, as I packed up to leave, I overheard Brianna whisper to Kayla, "She's perfect there, keeps the boss happy seeing someone always working." They laughed, thinking I couldn't hear. I froze. Suddenly it made sense why I was by the door, why they wanted me there. I wasn't one of them. I was decoration. A buffer. Someone to make the team look good while being kept out of the spotlight. That night, sitting in my car, I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror and made myself a quiet promise. They might think I belonged by the door, but they had no idea who they'd just seated there. That seat by the door would soon become my weapon and their downfall. I told myself it was just office politics, but soon, the jokes turned cruel. For a while, I tried to brush it off. I told myself that maybe I was overthinking things, that they didn't mean to exclude me or mock me, but pretending ignorance became exhausting, especially when every day brought a new reminder of how unwanted I was. Brianna had a way of disguising cruelty with charm. Her words were dipped in honey but cut deep once they landed. "Nadia, you're such a team player," she'd say, handing me a stack of papers. "You don't mind doing the boring stuff, right? You're just so good at it." Then she'd laugh, and her little followers would echo her, the sound sharp as glass. At first, I convinced myself it was a joke, harmless teasing, but then the tasks started piling up. I was the one fetching coffee, fixing printer jams, and running to other departments when something went wrong. My actual work, the analytical reports I was hired for, became secondary to cleaning up their messes. When I stayed late, Brianna would pat my shoulder and say, "You're so dedicated, Nadia. You make the rest of us look lazy." She'd say it with that same fake cheer that made my skin crawl. I'd smile back and answer, "Just doing my job." But inside, I was burning. The others followed her lead. Kayla once left a stack of drafts on my desk at 4:55 p.m. "You're better with details," she said, grabbing her purse. "Fix this before morning." I wanted to protest but didn't. I told myself it wasn't worth it, that good work would get noticed eventually. It didn't. Our manager, Mr. Keaton, was the type who trusted Brianna completely. If she said a project was going well, he believed her. During meetings, when I tried to share an idea, Brianna would interrupt with a polished version of the same thought, and he'd nod approvingly at her. It was humiliating. I'd walk back to my desk by the door, smiling tightly, pretending I didn't notice. But I did, every time. The jokes got worse over time. Once, when my cardigan got caught on the doorknob, they laughed for a full minute. "She's literally part of the door now," Kayla cackled. "Guess she found her place." I laughed weakly, but later, in the restroom, I stared at my reflection and wondered what was wrong with me, why I couldn't stand up for myself. It wasn't all cruelty, though. There was one person who saw me, Rosa, the janitor. She was in her late 50s, with warm brown eyes and hands that had seen a lifetime of work. Every evening, as she emptied trash cans, she'd pause by my desk. "Still here, Mija?" she'd ask, her voice soft but knowing. I'd smile and shrug. "Deadlines." She'd look toward Brianna's empty desk, then back at me. "Don't let them step on your light, okay? You shine quiet, but you shine strong." Her words settled deep inside me, like a seed I didn't know would grow later. By the third month, I stopped trying to fit in. I came to work, did my tasks, and left quietly. But isolation had a way of sharpening my senses. I noticed things I hadn't before: the way Brianna looked at me when the boss walked by, how she'd whisper right after I said something, or how the others would quickly close tabs when I passed their desks. I started wondering if they wanted me by the door for another reason entirely, something beyond mockery or power games. One morning, as I walked in early, I caught Brianna glancing toward me with that calculating smirk. "Perfect," she murmured to the others. "She's right where we need her. Right where they needed me." The words haunted me for days. I didn't know what she meant yet, but a chill ran through me every time I replayed it in my head. Then one day, I found out exactly why they wanted me by that door. It wasn't just about seating, it was about surveillance. The realization came slowly, piece by piece, like a puzzle I didn't know I was solving. One Monday morning, I noticed Brianna kept glancing toward me every few minutes. At first, I thought she was just checking on me. But her eyes weren't really on me, they were looking past me, toward the hallway. It didn't make sense until Mr. Keaton stepped out of his office, and Brianna suddenly snapped into professional mode, closing tabs and straightening papers. The others followed her lead instantly. It hit me like a cold wave: they weren't glancing at me. They were watching the door through me. I was sitting in the perfect spot, the first to see when the boss came out, the first to catch when someone important walked by. I was their early warning system. The next few days confirmed it. Whenever Mr. Keaton walked out unexpectedly, I'd notice Brianna's team acting like they'd rehearsed it, clicking their screens into spreadsheets, straightening up, pretending to be deep in work. But when he wasn't around, the room turned into a gossip lounge again. Once, as a test, I leaned slightly back when I saw the boss approaching, pretending to stretch. Brianna caught my movement instantly and whispered, "Heads up!" The whole team shifted in unison just seconds before he entered. My stomach twisted. They were using me, my seat, my position, my silence. Later that day, Brianna walked over and gave me that same false sweet smile. "You know, Nadia, I think it's really working out having you sit there. You're kind of like our lookout, always alert." She winked. as if it were a compliment. The others chuckled. I forced a smile, my hands tightening around my pen so hard it almost snapped. I realized that being by the door wasn't random, it was strategy. I was their shield, the one who absorbed scrutiny, the one who made them look busy. And when things went wrong, I'd be the easiest scapegoat. That evening, I sat at my desk long after everyone else had gone home. The glow of the computer screen cast long shadows across the empty office. I thought about all the times they laughed, all the times they used me as a prop to stay safe. The humiliation burned in my chest, but underneath it, something else started to stir focus. When Rosa passed by with her cart, she stopped and frowned. "You look like you're planning something," she said softly. "Maybe I am," I replied without looking up. She nodded like she understood more than I'd said. "Just make sure whatever you plan, you don't lose yourself in it, Mija. Some people deserve their own downfall, you just have to let gravity do the work." Her words stuck with me. From that day on, I started paying attention. I watched the watchers. I noted when Brianna used me to warn the team, when she whispered behind my back, and when she tried to shift blame. I even started keeping small notes on my phone times, dates, and what I observed. The next week, something strange happened. Brianna sent out a group email late at night. It wasn't unusual for her. But this time, I noticed she'd added me to the thread accidentally, or maybe she didn't realize it. The subject line read, "Tomorrow's strategy, keep eyes on deck." It sounded harmless until I opened it and saw how they referred to me. They called me our door girl. They joked that I keep the coast clear, and that I earned her spot guarding the gate. My chest tightened as I scrolled further. Reading their laughter in text form digital proof of my humiliation. I wanted to delete it, pretend I'd never seen it. But something inside me refused to let go. Instead, I quietly saved it to a hidden folder. The next morning, Brianna was unusually cheerful. She winked at me as I sat down, sipping her coffee. "Big day today, door girl," she said, tapping her cup. "Keep an eye out for us." I smiled back, but this time my heart wasn't sinking, it was hardening. And then, an email accidentally sent to me changed everything. The subject line read, "Project Dummy, keep her there." It was late afternoon when that email came in. I was buried in spreadsheets when I saw the notification flash on my screen. Normally, I ignored most of Brianna's after-hours messages, but this one caught my attention because my name was mentioned in the preview line. I clicked it open without thinking, and the world seemed to tilt for a second. It was a group email between Brianna, Kayla, Reese, and Donna. The thread was full of laughter, sarcastic comments, and snide jokes. At first, it looked like typical office banter until I saw the part that made my stomach twist. "Keep Nadia by the door," Brianna had written. "She's perfect there. Makes the room look busy when Keaton walks by. She's basically our project dummy. Just smile and let her think she's one of us." Kayla had replied with laughing emojis and added, "She's like our office plant, decorative and quiet." Reese followed with, "At least she's good for diversity points. HR will love us for that." And Donna had written, "Lol, our own little doormat by the door." My hand froze on the mouse. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, my chest tight, my breath uneven. I scrolled down, half hoping I'd misunderstood, that there was some joke or context I was missing. But there wasn't. It was exactly what it looked like. Humiliation in writing, laid out in bold font for me to read. They hadn't just made fun of me. They had planned to keep me small. My position wasn't random or circumstantial, it was deliberate. I was there to serve their comfort, to keep them protected, to make them look competent. I sat frozen, the room spinning around me. The laughter from earlier in the day echoed in my head like ghosts. I wanted to cry, to storm out, to forward the email to HR and let the world see who they really were. But something deep inside me, something cold, sharp, and newly awakened, told me not to. Not yet. I read the email again, this time slower. Then I clicked Save As and stored it in a hidden folder under a neutral name, Reports, Backup, 3. I printed a copy, folded it neatly, and slipped it into my bag. Then I deleted the message from my inbox to make sure they'd never know I'd seen it. When I left that evening, I walked past Brianna's desk. She was on the phone, laughing about something trivial, but she looked up at me mid-laugh. "Night door girl," she said playfully. I smiled, a real one, but not for her. It was for me. Because for the first time, I wasn't the fool anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every snicker, every innocent comment, every task they'd dumped on me. But instead of feeling weak, I felt awake, aware in a way I hadn't before. Rosa's voice echoed in my head. "Some people deserve their own downfall, you just have to let gravity do the work." The next morning, I arrived early and started watching, documenting, collecting. I noticed how often Brianna took credit for others' work. I saw how she manipulated Mr. Keaton, flattering him while hiding mistakes. I kept every piece of evidence, timestamps, files, emails. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I knew this. I wasn't going to let them win quietly. Days turned into weeks, and my silence became my weapon. They thought I was still their project dummy. They didn't realize I was observing everything, every word and whisper that would one day undo them. I started noticing more falsified numbers, fake client feedback, incomplete reports disguised as finished. Brianna had been lying to management for months, and I had the proof sitting right there in front of me. One evening, Rosa found me still typing long after everyone had gone home. She placed a cup of tea beside me. "You look like a woman who's building something," she said quietly. "I am," I replied, my voice steady. "A way out." Rosa smiled. "Good. Just make sure when you walk out, they're the ones left behind." I nodded, my heart calm for the first time in months. That's when I decided they picked the wrong woman to sit by the door. I stopped reacting and started planning. Something inside me shifted after that night. The helplessness I'd carried for months hardened into purpose. I wasn't going to cry in bathrooms anymore or hope for fairness from people who enjoyed watching me squirm. No, I was going to make them see me. I didn't want their approval or their friendship. I wanted their silence when they realized I'd beaten them at their own game. I knew if I went to HR too soon, they'd spin it against me. Brianna was too smooth, too good at playing victim when needed. I needed proof, undeniable, time-stamped, official. So, I started small. I began by quietly auditing my own work and saving everything to a private drive. Every report, every data set, every file I'd contributed to, I backed up under my personal cloud account. Brianna didn't notice. She was too busy taking credit for my projects during meetings, too confident that I was still her compliant door girl. That overconfidence became her blind spot. I began double-checking everything she submitted under her name. If I caught mistakes, and there were plenty, I fixed them before forwarding the accurate versions directly to Mr. Keaton, phrasing my emails with care. Just wanted to ensure these figures are correct before submission. He always thanked me politely, clearly assuming Brianna had delegated me to handle the details. But over time, I noticed his tone shifting from polite to impressed. Meanwhile, Brianna started to sense something she couldn't quite name. When the boss praised the accuracy of recent reports, she smiled awkwardly, claiming credit as usual. But her eyes flickered toward me, curious and uneasy. I met her gaze, calm and unreadable. I could tell it unsettled her. Around that time, I befriended Eric from IT, a quiet guy with messy hair and an easy smile. I told him I was having trouble syncing document versions across the shared drive. As he explained how edit logs worked, something clicked. The company's system automatically tracked every change and recorded which user made it. That meant every correction I'd made to Brianna's work had a visible footprint. My initials were stamped right beside hers, proof of my real contributions. That night, I stayed late again. The office was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. I opened the version history on a few major projects and took screenshots of every edit I'd made, every correction that had saved Brianna from embarrassment. Then I compiled them into a neat, labeled folder. "Evidence!" I whispered to myself. Rosa walked by and saw me working. Still here, Mija? She asked softly. The same question she'd asked 100 times. Not for long, I replied, my eyes still on the screen. She smiled knowingly. You're building a quiet storm, I smiled back. It's almost ready. From that day on, I made sure to look busy but not suspicious. I laughed when they laughed, nodded when they made snide remarks, even fetched their coffees without protest. Every act of compliance was camouflage. They thought they still had control, but the truth was, I had already taken it from them. By the end of the month, Mr. Keaton began bypassing Brianna for minor clarifications and emailing me directly. She tried to laugh it off, saying, "Guess he just likes bothering you with the small stuff." But I saw the irritation twitch at the corner of her mouth. She started micromanaging me, double-checking things I'd done perfectly. But that only made her look insecure. Her once commanding tone began to waver, her jokes about me sounding forced. The others, Kayla, Reese, and Donna, noticed but stayed silent. I didn't push further. Not yet. I was waiting for the right time, the moment when they'd feel most comfortable, most sure that they still had me under control. That's when the fall would hurt the most. But I wasn't prepared for how far they'd go when they felt me rising. Brianna decided to make an example out of me. The shift in her attitude started subtly colder glances, clipped responses, whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. I could sense her unease growing, her dominance slipping away one grain at a time. For someone like Brianna, losing control wasn't an option. So she did what people like her always do when they feel threatened, she plotted. It began with something small. She forgot to copy me on important emails. Then she scheduled meetings at times that conveniently overlapped with my workload, ensuring I couldn't attend. But the real blow came one morning when I walked into the office and noticed the team huddled together, whispering excitedly. When they saw me, they went silent. "Morning," I said, keeping my tone even. "Morning," Brianna replied too sweetly. "Oh, and Nadia, there's a client presentation today at 10. Just make sure you stay by the door in case we need handouts or anything, okay?" I nodded. She smiled, satisfied, and turned away. At 9:45, I printed the presentation materials, the ones I'd spent days preparing, and waited by the door like she'd asked. 10 o'clock came and went. The office grew quiet. Confused, I checked the calendar and realized the meeting was marked as 9:30. They had started without me. A cold realization sank in. I hurried to the conference room. Through the glass wall, I saw Brianna standing confidently at the front, clicking through slides I had made my work, my analysis, my data. The others sat around the table, nodding along. My name wasn't on any of the slides, not once. I stood there for a moment, frozen, watching her take credit for weeks of my effort. The client smiled approvingly. Keaton was there too, jotting down notes, completely unaware. Finally, I pushed open the door. The sound made everyone turn. "Oh, Nadia," Brianna said brightly, her eyes gleaming with fake surprise. "Didn't you get the time update?" I told the team 9:30 this morning. My mouth went dry. "No," I said quietly. "You didn't." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut air. "Mr. Keaton frowned. "Is everything okay here?" "Totally fine," Brianna chirped. "Just a little scheduling mix-up. You know how mornings get." He nodded dismissively and gestured for her to continue. I stood there for a moment, every instinct screaming to expose her right there, to tell them the slides were mine, but I didn't. I turned and walked out instead, my heels clicking against the floor like a countdown. In the restroom, I locked the door and leaned against the sink. My hands trembled. For months, I'd endured their laughter, their whispers, their cruelty, but watching Brianna steal my work so publicly, that was different. That wasn't humiliation, that was theft. For a few minutes I let the anger consume me. Tears came, hot and fast, but when they stopped, I felt lighter, clearer. Rosa found me later, sitting by the vending machines, staring at my reflection in the glass. "Bad day?" she asked softly. "The worst," I admitted. She handed me a tissue. "You know, sometimes life puts us by the door so we can see who needs to leave." I laughed quietly through the ache. "I think I know exactly who that is." Her eyes twinkled. "Then make sure they see it coming." That night, I drove home in silence. I didn't listen to music. I didn't cry. I just planned. Every memory, every slight, every insult, I stacked them like dominoes in my mind. Brianna thought she'd embarrassed me. She thought she'd won. But she didn't realize that the only thing she'd done was light the fuse. If they wanted a storm, they'd get one. The plan started small, invisible. Like me. The Monday after the presentation, I walked into the office with a calmness that felt foreign, deliberate. I wasn't going to raise my voice or demand credit. I was going to let my actions speak louder than Brianna's manipulation ever could. From that day forward, everything I did had a purpose. Every keystroke, every smile, every thank you became part of something much bigger. I started by observing patterns. Brianna was predictable. She thrived on attention and control. She always wanted to be seen as the star, so she often rushed her work, trusting me to polish the details. That arrogance became her first crack. I began subtly fixing her mistakes but leaving small inconsistencies untouched, just enough to make her reports look sloppy but not suspiciously altered. When those reports went to Mr. Keaton, he'd frown and ask Brianna to recheck her numbers. She'd glare across the office, confused and irritated. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet and diligent. If he asked me to double-check something, I'd do it perfectly. Within a few weeks, the unspoken comparison between us had begun. The next phase of my plan came by accident. One evening, I overheard Brianna on the phone in the break room, bad-mouthing a client, mocking their accent, their budget, their ridiculous expectations. She didn't realize I was sitting just outside, pretending to type. I hit record on my phone. Her words poured out carelessly, full of disdain. "They're idiots," she said, laughing. "I only tolerate them because they pay on time." When I replayed the recording later, I knew it would be useful, not yet, but someday. I started staying late more often, not because I had to, but because silence made people careless. When everyone else had gone home, I'd walk by their desks, noting the files they left open, the emails they forgot to close. They were sloppy, overconfident. Rosa became my silent ally, though she didn't know the full extent of what I was doing. She'd leave me coffee and smile knowingly when she saw me still working. "You're quiet, but I can hear your thunder coming," she said once, chuckling softly. I smiled back. They won't hear it until it hits. Over the next few weeks, I gathered everything: emails showing Brianna taking credit for my work, Slack messages mocking clients, even timestamps proving she'd submitted reports I'd created. I organized it all neatly, like building a case for a trial that hadn't started yet. Mr. Keaton started noticing me more. He began asking for my opinion in meetings. "Nadia, what do you think about this client data?" he'd ask. I'd answer calmly, confidently, and every time, he'd nod with approval. Brianna would force a smile, her nails tapping nervously against the table. The others, Kayla, Reese, and Donna, grew quieter too. Their laughter faded when I walked by. They still gossiped, but now it carried a nervous edge. They could feel something shifting, even if they didn't understand it yet. By late March, Brianna's reports had enough inconsistencies that Mr. Keaton started sending her gentle check-in emails. I knew it was only a matter of time before those became warnings. But I didn't just want her reprimanded. I wanted her exposed. So, I waited for the perfect opportunity, the one event where all eyes would be on her, where her reputation mattered most. The company's annual review meeting was 2 weeks away. It was where the department heads presented their results for the quarter, where promotions were decided, and where Brianna always shined brightest. I spent the following days preparing not for failure, but for revelation. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered was ready. I updated reports, compiled statistics, and made sure every document could be traced back to me. The closer the meeting came, the more Brianna seemed to unravel. She snapped at her team, her jokes lost their bite, and that confident smile of hers started to falter. I stayed calm through it all, polite and composed. On the outside, I was still the quiet girl by the door. But on the inside, I was counting down the days. And then came the moment I'd been waiting for, the annual review meeting. It was my chance to step out from behind that door. The morning of the annual review meeting felt different. The air was heavier, the office quieter. Even Brianna seemed unusually tense. She wore a bold red blazer, her power color, as she called it, and strutted around, rehearsing her presentation with her usual flair. But beneath the surface confidence, I saw the cracks. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her laughter was forced, tight around the edges. I sat at my desk, pretending to finalize data for her slides. In truth, I was making sure every file, every report, every figure was properly attributed to me. The version histories, edit logs, and timestamps were all synced and backed up. If anyone questioned ownership, the digital trail would lead right to my name. At exactly 10 a.m., Mr. Keaton called us into the conference room. The room smelled faintly of coffee and nerves. Executives from other departments filled the seats. The annual review wasn't just another meeting, it was a showcase. Promotions, bonuses, and reputations were made or broken here. Brianna started strong, as she always did. "Our team had an incredible quarter," she said with a bright smile. "We improved client retention by 15% and delivered 3 major campaigns ahead of schedule." I watched her move through her slides with practiced confidence, throwing in little jokes that made the room chuckle. She was good at this, I had to give her that. But as she spoke, my heart didn't race like it usually did. There was no fear, only focus. When she got to the performance breakdown, she paused briefly and said, "Of course, none of this would be possible without my amazing team." Her tone was sweet, calculated. "Nadia here has been so helpful with data cleanup and admin support." Admin support. That's what months of work, long nights, and stress had been reduced to. A title that meant nothing. Mr. Keaton looked at me briefly, then back at Brianna. "Cleanup?" he repeated. "Is that how her work fits into the reports?" Brianna nodded quickly. "Yes, she keeps everything neat and organized for me." "Couldn't do it without her." That was my cue. I smiled politely and leaned forward. "Actually," I said, keeping my tone steady, "most of the analytics in those slides are my work. The reports and metrics were finalized under my login." The room went silent. Brianna froze for a split second before laughing softly. "Oh, Nadia, you're too modest." "We collaborated, of course, but the strategy—" I interrupted gently. "If you'd like, I can show the version logs. They'll confirm who made the data updates and corrections. It's all in the shared drive." Mr. Keaton raised an eyebrow. "Yes, let's take a look." Brianna's color drained. "That's not necessary," she said quickly. But he was already typing. The projector screen flickered as the version history appeared. My initials filled the list, line after line of revisions, corrections, additions. Mr. Keaton leaned back slowly. "Interesting. Looks like Nadia's been leading quite a bit of the analytical work." Brianna's lips tightened. "Well, we're a team. So..." Her words tangled. The confidence she wore like armor cracked in front of everyone. I didn't need to gloat or raise my voice. The silence in that room said everything. When the meeting ended, Mr. Keaton shook my hand. "Good work, Nadia," he said sincerely. "I'd like to see more of your insights moving forward." Brianna stood beside me, smiling stiffly, her jaw clenched. As we left the room, she grabbed my arm, her voice low and venomous. "You think you're clever, don't you?" I met her glare calmly. "No," I said softly, "just accurate." Her nails dug into her palm, but she let go and stormed off, her heels echoing down the hall. The others, Kayla, Reese, and Donna, avoided my eyes. They knew the balance had shifted. The girl by the door wasn't invisible anymore. I returned to my desk, exhaling for what felt like the first time in months. I should have felt relieved. Triumphant, even. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Because women like Brianna didn't surrender. They schemed. Because Brianna wasn't done fighting, she was about to get desperate. Desperation makes people reckless. After the annual review, everything in the office changed: the air, the tone, even the silence. It was subtle at first. The team still smiled, still joked, still pretended everything was fine, but the laughter was hollow now. Brianna's control had cracked, and everyone could feel it. She was polite to me in front of others, overly so, but when no one was around, her eyes turned sharp as glass. A few days later, she approached my desk, leaning against it like nothing had happened. "You know, Nadia," she began, twirling a pen between her fingers. "You really surprised me in that meeting. Didn't think you had it in you." I looked up from my screen, keeping my voice calm. "I just wanted credit for the work I did." "Of course," she said smoothly. "Everyone deserves credit. I just hope you understand how things work here. You can't just bypass the chain of command. It makes people look bad." I met her eyes. "Only the people who have something to hide." For a second, the mask slipped. I saw the fury flash in her eyes before she forced another smile. "You've got some nerve," she said softly. "I'll give you that." Then, with a tilt of her head, she added, "Be careful, though. This company isn't as loyal as you think." She walked away, her perfume lingering in the air like poison. I should have been afraid. Instead, I felt a strange calm. Her threats were a sign of weakness. She was losing ground, and she knew it. But I also knew she wasn't finished. The following Monday, the storm hit. I walked into the office to find the atmosphere thick with tension. People avoided my gaze. A few whispered near the copier, glancing at me like I'd done something terrible. When I logged into my computer, I understood why. An email from Mr. Keaton was sitting in my inbox. "Urgent. Need to discuss report discrepancy." My stomach dropped. I opened the attachment, a client report I supposedly sent last week. Only it wasn't mine. The numbers were wrong. Entire sections were missing. And the file name carried my initials. It made me look careless. Unprofessional. Exactly the kind of mistake that could get someone demoted or fired. Within minutes, I was called into Mr. Keaton's office. His expression was serious. "Nadia, what happened with the Calbright report? This doesn't look like your usual work." I stayed calm. "Because it's not my work. Someone altered it." He frowned. "Do you have proof?" I nodded. "Yes. I keep backups of all my reports. May I show you?" He gestured toward the screen. I pulled up the original file, perfectly formatted, accurate, time-stamped, days before the corrupted version was sent. Then I opened the version logs. The falsified one had been accessed by Brianna's account. Mr. Keaton leaned forward. "You're certain about this?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "It wasn't a mistake. It was planted." He sat back, silent for a moment. Then he said quietly, "Let me handle this. Don't say anything to her yet." I nodded, keeping my face neutral, but inside, my pulse was pounding. It was exactly what I'd expected: her last, desperate attempt to make me look incompetent. When I returned to my desk, Brianna was waiting, leaning casually against the wall, with a smirk. "Rough morning?" she asked. I tilted my head slightly. "You tell me." Her smile faltered for half a second. "Careful," she whispered. "People might start thinking you're paranoid." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a folder on my computer labeled Proof. Dozens of screenshots, emails, and audio clips sat inside. I knew exactly what I'd show if she pushed further. Later that day, Rosa caught me by the elevator. "You've got that look again," she said softly. "What look?" "The one people get right before they finish something." I smiled faintly. "You could say that." That evening, I organized my final folder, a detailed record of everything Brianna had done. The fake report, the stolen work, the insults, even the recording of her mocking the client. I compiled it into one tidy presentation. Tomorrow, the client meeting would take place the perfect stage. And this time, I wasn't the lookout by the door. I was the one about to open it and show everyone the truth. Because tomorrow was the client meeting and the trap was set. When the truth wants out, it finds a way. The morning of the client meeting felt like standing at the edge of a cliff that's still, tense silence before the drop. Everyone in the office was on edge. Brianna strutted around with forced confidence, clicking her heels a little too loudly, giving orders no one had asked for. The others followed her lead, pretending not to see the cracks forming in her perfect act. I kept my focus steady, my hands calm as I reviewed the reports one last time. My version, the real one, was stored safely on both my laptop and a USB drive tucked inside my jacket pocket. Brianna had no idea that the very weapon she forged against me would be the one to destroy her. At 10 a.m., the clients arrived, 2 representatives from Calbright Industries. They were polite but sharp, their expressions unreadable. Mr. Keaton greeted them warmly and ushered everyone into the conference room. Brianna led the way, her smile wide, her tone rehearsed. "Thank you so much for being here. We're excited to show you our updated projections." I sat quietly near the end of the table, my usual door seat. Though this time it was by choice. I wanted a full view of everything and everyone. Brianna started her presentation confidently, clicking through slides filled with fake numbers. The same numbers she had forged under my name. "As you can see," she said, gesturing proudly, "we've exceeded your growth targets by 12% this quarter." The clients exchanged a look, the kind that said something's off. One of them, a tall man with silver hair, leaned forward. "That's interesting," he said slowly. "Our internal data doesn't reflect that figure." Brianna's smile tightened. "Oh, there must be a delay in your system. We're quite certain of these results." Mr. Keaton frowned slightly, his eyes flicking toward me. I met his gaze, calm and steady. "Actually," I said, speaking up for the first time, "those numbers aren't accurate." The room fell silent. Brianna's head snapped toward me. "Excuse me?" she said sharply. I stood, moving toward the projector. "If you'll allow me," I continued, plugging in my USB drive, "I'd like to show the verified version of the report, the one I originally submitted before it was modified." Mr. Keaton gave a small nod. "Go ahead." The screen changed as my version appeared crisp, accurate, transparent. Every figure aligned perfectly with the client's internal data. I pointed to the timestamp and author information on the document. "This version was finalized by me," I said clearly. The altered version was uploaded later from Brianna's account. The color drained from her face. "That's a lie," she snapped. "She's twisting things. She probably changed it herself." "Mr. said." Keaton didn't respond. Instead, he opened the file properties. The metadata told the story for us. Every change, every edit, every falsified number was clearly tied to Brianna's login. The clients looked furious. "You've been sending us manipulated data?" one of them asked coldly. "We made financial decisions based on this," Brianna stammered. No, it was just a misunderstanding." I reached into my folder and handed Mr. Blaine Keaton a printed copy of the email I'd saved weeks ago, the one where Brianna called me Project Dummy. "If you'd like additional context," I said quietly, "this might help." The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Keaton read the email slowly, his jaw tightening. When he looked up, there was no trace of confusion left, only anger. "Brianna," he said evenly, "we'll discuss this after the meeting." She sank into her chair, pale and speechless. I turned back to the clients, my voice steady. "I apologize on behalf of our team for the confusion. I'll personally oversee the correction of all data moving forward." They nodded, visibly relieved. One of them even smiled slightly. "Thank you, Miss Collins," he said. "That's the clarity we needed." When the meeting ended, no one spoke. Brianna left the room without looking at anyone. Mr. Keaton lingered behind, resting a hand on my shoulder. "That was impressive," he said quietly. "And brave." I simply nodded. It was overdue. As I walked back to my desk, the office felt heavier, like the aftermath of a storm. The whispers had stopped. The laughter was gone. Everyone knew what had just happened. For months, I'd been their lookout by the door, the one who saw everything but said nothing. Today, I had finally opened that door and let the truth walk in. And with that, Brianna's empire began to crumble. The fallout was swift and brutal. The hours after the client meeting felt like watching a house collapse in slow motion. The tension that had filled the office for months finally snapped. And the aftermath was loud, messy, and undeniable. Word spread faster than I expected. By noon, everyone knew what had happened in that conference room. The laughter, the gossip, the sideways glances all gone. In their place was a heavy silence that followed Brianna like a shadow. She tried to recover at first, acting as though it were a simple misunderstanding. I overheard her trying to charm Mr. Keaton in his office later that afternoon. "It was all a mix-up," she insisted, her voice shaking slightly. "I must have uploaded the wrong file by mistake." But Mr. Keaton wasn't buying it anymore. "This isn't the first inconsistency I've noticed," he said sternly. "And this isn't about one report. It's a pattern." When she came out of his office, her eyes were red. She didn't look at anyone as she passed. For the first time, the woman who had always walked with her head high, laughing at others, looked small human. By the next morning, HR had called me in. I expected it. They asked for a statement, and I provided everything. The emails, the version histories, the screenshots, even the recordings of Brianna mocking the client. I didn't embellish or gloat. I spoke plainly, just the facts. The HR director, a stern woman named Julia, took notes silently, her pen scratching across the paper. When I finished, she looked up at me. "You've been very patient," she said. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" "Because I needed to be believed," I said simply. "And I wanted the truth to be clear without question." She nodded. "You did the right thing." Over the next few days, HR interviewed everyone, Kayla, Reese, and Donna included. Fear replaced loyalty. The same women who had laughed at me were now tripping over each other to save themselves. They told HR everything. How Brianna took credit for my work. How she called me names behind my back. How she used my position by the door to spy on the boss. They confessed to the fake report. To the manipulation. To everything. Brianna's empire, built on arrogance and deceit, fell apart in less than a week. Friday morning, the official announcement came. HR sent a brief company-wide email stating that Brianna had been terminated due to ethical violations and falsification of data. It was sterile, impersonal, but to me, it was beautiful. That afternoon, I found her packing up her desk. She didn't notice me at first. When she did, her expression flickered between anger and shame. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. "You must feel proud," she said finally, her voice brittle. "No," I replied quietly. "Just free." She didn't respond. She zipped up her bag, straightened her blazer, and walked out past the door where I'd once sat, the door that had been my prison for months. I watched her go, not with hatred, but with a strange, peaceful detachment. She had written her own ending. I'd just refused to be part of her story anymore. When Rosa came by later, she found me standing there, lost in thought. "She's gone, huh?" I nodded. Rosa smiled softly. "You know, Misha, sometimes the best revenge is peace. You didn't have to shout. You didn't have to fight dirty. You just let the truth speak." I smiled back, tears stinging my eyes. "It took a while, but I think it was worth it." That evening, as the office lights dimmed, I sat for a moment at my old seat by the door. It didn't feel like exile anymore. It felt like victory, quiet, earned, and complete. For months, that seat had been a symbol of humiliation. Now, it was proof of resilience. I realized I'd never been by the door because I didn't belong. I'd been there because one day I was meant to walk through it. But the final revenge wasn't about her, it was about me. I wasn't done yet, not until I reclaimed everything they stole. Brianna was gone, but the echoes of her cruelty lingered in the office like dust in sunlight. People still whispered when I walked by, not out of malice anymore, but out of guilt. They didn't know how to talk to me, the woman they'd ignored and mocked for months. I didn't blame them. I just didn't care anymore. I wasn't here for their apologies. I was here to make sure my work, my name, and my dignity were restored. The Monday after her firing, Mr. Keaton called me into his office. He looked more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. "Nadia," he said, gesturing to a chair. "First of all, thank you. What you did took integrity and a lot of patience." "Thank you, sir," I said softly, though a part of me wanted to tell him that integrity shouldn't have to come at the cost of peace. He continued, "I've been reviewing the last 6 months of project files. It's clear your contributions go far beyond what your title suggests. I've already spoken to HR about a formal audit to make sure you're credited properly." Those words, credited properly, were like balm on a wound I'd forgotten how to close. Over the next 2 weeks, HR conducted the audit. They combed through every project, every presentation, every deliverable from our team. It didn't take long for the truth to surface. My name appeared everywhere, buried under Brianna's. Reports, proposals, even emails I'd written were found reused under her signature. When Julia from HR called me back into her office, she smiled for the first time. "You were the backbone of that department," she said simply. "And it's time the company recognizes that." A week later, Mr. Keaton offered me a promotion. Senior analyst, team lead. For a moment, I didn't believe him. I stared at the letter, the title, the pay raise, wondering if this was real or another illusion that would crumble in my hands. But it wasn't. This time, it was mine. "I'd like you to lead the new restructuring project," he added. "You've earned it. And you can pick your own assistant." The decision was easy. "Rosa," I said without hesitation. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "The janitor?" I smiled. "The only person in this building who treated me like a human being when no one else did." He nodded slowly, almost in admiration. "Then Rosa it is." When I told her the news, she laughed so hard she cried. "Miha? Me? A fancy office assistant? What am I going to do with that?" "Keep me grounded," I said, hugging her. "You already have." Together, we moved into the newly redesigned office. My office. I made sure the layout was open, welcoming. No one would ever sit by the door again. There would be no invisible corners, no silent exclusions. Everyone would have a voice. The first day in my new role, I stood at the glass wall, looking out at the floor below. The same desks, the same people, but the energy was different now. I wasn't the quiet girl hoping to fit in anymore. I was the one leading the way. When I walked past the desks of my old teammates, they avoided eye contact. Kayla muttered a half-hearted, "Congrats." Reese offered a small nod. And Donna couldn't even look up from her monitor. I didn't gloat. I just smiled politely and kept walking. Power wasn't about revenge, I realized. It was about reclaiming the space they tried to shrink you into and making it your own. That afternoon, Rosa placed a small potted plant on my desk. "Something to remind you," she said. "Of what?" She smiled. "That you grew from dirt they tried to bury you in." I looked at the plant, small, green, alive, and felt something deep inside me finally unclench. But karma had one more twist to deliver. 3 months later, Brianna called me, desperate for a reference. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon, the kind of day where the hum of computers and the tapping of keyboards blended into a calm rhythm. Rosa had just stepped out for coffee, and I was finalizing a quarterly report when my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but something about it made me pause before answering. "Hello?" I said. A hesitant breath came through the line. "Nadia, it's Brianna." For a moment, the name didn't register. It felt like a ghost had spoken, a voice from a life I'd already buried. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence hang. "Brianna," I repeated evenly. "Didn't expect to hear from you." She gave a nervous laugh that didn't quite sound like her. "Yeah, I bet you didn't. Look, I'll get straight to it. I'm having a little trouble finding a new position. People keep asking for references from Axion, and, well, you were the one who worked with me the longest." The irony almost made me laugh. The woman who once called me door girl now needed my word to move forward. "So, you want me to vouch for you?" I asked carefully. She rushed her words, as if she could outrun her own shame. "I know things got tense between us, but we did good work together. You know I can deliver results. I just need someone credible to confirm that." Her voice cracked slightly at the end. It was strange hearing her like this, small, uncertain, human. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. I let a long pause stretch out before answering. "You know, Brianna," I said finally, "I've thought a lot about the things you said to me, about how you treated me. And I have to admit, I'm surprised you'd even think I'd help you after all that." She sighed heavily. "I deserve that. I was stupid. Competitive. I thought putting you down made me stronger. But I lost everything because of it. Please, Nadia. I just need one person to say I'm not a complete disaster." Her tone wasn't manipulative this time, it was real. Desperation stripped away her arrogance, leaving only regret. I took a deep breath, staring out my office window at the afternoon sun. "I'll tell them the truth," I said simply. There was a flicker of hope in her voice. "Thank you. That's all I'm asking. The truth," I continued, "is that you're good at presentations, confident in meetings, and you know how to charm people when you need to. But I'll also tell them you falsified reports, manipulated coworkers, and created a toxic environment, because that's the truth too." Silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. "You really won't give me a second chance, will you?" I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the calm settle over me. "You gave me plenty of chances to speak up when you humiliated me. You just never listened. This isn't revenge, Brianna, it's honesty." She didn't reply. I heard a quiet sniffle, then a soft click as the call ended. I stared at the phone for a long time, my emotions a mix of sorrow and satisfaction. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't gloated. I just told the truth, something she'd always twisted to suit her needs. It felt cleansing. Rosa returned a few minutes later, handing me my coffee. "You look lighter," she said, studying my face. "I just closed a chapter," I replied. She nodded knowingly. "Justice doesn't always mean punishment, Mija. Sometimes it just means peace." I smiled faintly. "Then I guess I've got both." As the day ended, I found myself thinking about the girl I used to be, the one who sat quietly by the door, afraid to take up space. That girl had been broken, humiliated, underestimated, but she'd rebuilt herself piece by piece until she didn't just survive, she rose. And the best part? She didn't need validation from anyone anymore. And that's when I realized I never sat by the door again. Now, when I walk through that door, it opens for me, not against me. It's been over a year since Brianna left Axion, and sometimes, when the office is quiet and the sunlight spills across the floor, I still think about that old desk by the door. It's strange how something that once felt like punishment now feels like a symbol of everything I overcame. The door hasn't moved, but I have. These days, I start my mornings early. I like being the first one in, unlocking the same glass door that used to separate me from everyone else. The air feels lighter now, full of possibilities instead of tension. My team greets me with real smiles, not the polite, brittle ones I used to see. They respect me, not because I'm their boss, but because I treat them the way I once wished someone had treated me. "Morning, Nadia," someone calls as I walk in. "Morning," I reply, setting my coffee down and opening my laptop. The screensavers blink awake, displaying the company's latest metrics, all accurate, transparent, clean. Numbers don't lie anymore. Neither do people. Rosa still sits across from me, though she refuses to call herself an assistant. She prefers office guardian. I let her. She's earned that title. She organizes schedules, brings warmth to every meeting, and somehow keeps everyone grounded. Sometimes, when things get hectic, she'll wink and say, "You got this, Mija. You already beat worse." She's right. A few months ago, HR asked me to mentor a group of new hires. Fresh faces, nervous smiles, and big dreams. The first day I stood in front of them, I caught sight of one woman sitting near the door, young, quiet, clearly anxious. For a moment, I saw myself in her. When I handed out the seating chart later, I made sure she wasn't left alone. Nobody gets the door seat anymore. Not in my office. As the weeks went by, I taught them what I learned the hard way, that competence without confidence is a cage. That silence can protect but also suffocate. And that sometimes the best revenge is simply thriving where others wanted to see you fall. One of them, a shy intern named Clara, stayed late one evening. "How did you do it?" she asked me. "How did you stay calm when they treated you so badly?" I thought about it before answering. "Because I knew the truth would eventually find its way out," I said. "And because I didn't want to become what they were. You don't need to shout to be powerful. You just need to keep standing." She nodded slowly, her eyes wide with understanding. I saw the spark in her, then the same spark I once buried under fear. Later that night, when the office emptied out, I walked to my old seat by the door. It was just a desk now, nothing special, but to me, it was sacred. I ran my fingers across its surface and smiled. I'd once sat there feeling invisible, unwanted, small. But that seat had witnessed my transformation. It had seen my tears, my silence, my resolve, and finally, my rise. I opened the bottom drawer and found a small metal plaque tucked inside the one with my old desk label, Nadia Collins, Junior Analyst. I kept it as a reminder of where I began. Rosa found me there, holding it. "Still thinking about the past?" she asked gently. I smiled, just remembering the view from down here. She laughed. "And now look at you running the whole floor." I placed the plaque back in the drawer and stood up. "It's not about running it," I said softly. "It's about making sure no one ever feels like I did." As I turned off the lights, I glanced one last time at the door. Once, it had been the boundary that kept me small. Now, it was the symbol of everything I had broken through. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't closing the door, it's walking through it on your own terms.